Hello and welcome. I'm Carolyn Grimminger with the First Unitarian Universalist Church of Austin. Welcome to the Public Affairs Forum. Our program's mission is to nourish the mind and spirit and serve social justice. Our forums occur on most Sundays at noon and are free and open to the public. We encourage you to attend. Our church is physically located at 4700 Grover Avenue in Austin, Texas. For more information, you can go to our website, for the Public Affairs Forum. You can go to the church website at www.austinuu.org. At this time, I'd like to introduce our speaker. Today is Professor James Loehlin. He is the UT English professor and director of the Shakespeare at Winedale program. He will be discussing Shakespeare's works, the Winedale program, and the upcoming production of A Midsummer Night's Dream, and I think we're going to have some people also here doing a scene, right? Okay. James was born in Austin, and his family are longtime members of our church. He holds degrees from UT, Oxford, and Stanford, and is now Shakespeare at Winedale Regents Professor of English at UT. He has published several books on the performance of Shakespeare, Marlowe, and Chekhov. He and his wife Laurel both grew up in Austin and have lived here again since 1999. And now please welcome Professor Loehlin.
Thank you. Thank you, Carolyn. Well, it is a pleasure to be back here in this church. As Carolyn said, I grew up in Austin. My family has been coming to the church for a long time, and I've actually spoken to Forum before, but not, I think, in here. So today I'm going to be talking a bit about the Shakespeare at Winedale program, Shakespeare in general, and Midsummer Night's Dream. And the talk is sort of organized on the model of a 5-act play, because that's what Shakespeare wrote. So Act 1 is Shakespeare. Why do we think that Shakespeare has become such an enduring figure in world cultural history? What are some things you think of, you associate with Shakespeare, and some reasons for Shakespeare's cultural value? Do people have thoughts from the audience? Mm-hmm. Truth, okay. There's a sense that Shakespeare's work contains some essential truths about the human experience, yep. British imperialism, also true. Shakespeare, as the kind of leading figure in British literary studies, was disseminated throughout the world through the British education system during the British Empire, and there are some kind of complicated relations between Shakespeare's work and some of the ideologies of that empire. Other thoughts? Yeah, very funny. Shakespeare can be extremely entertaining. Even today, 400 years after his death, his plays still have a lot of life on the stage. Any others? Yeah, Shakespeare was not only a great storyteller, but he was an incomparable poet, and his works still provide material for writers and thinkers today, for readers and audiences, and he had a really unparalleled command of the English language at a time when it was very dynamic, it was evolving, and he kind of fully mastered the resources, linguistic resources that were available to him, as well as telling many great and entertaining stories. So yeah, those are a lot of the, I think, important things. He was a man of the theater as well as a poet, and he lived and worked at a time when the Elizabethan theater was one of the great theaters of the world. There's a famous image from the 17th century of the Globe and the bear-baiting house that was next door. Those are actually mislabeled. This was the Globe. But it was a rich and vibrant theater culture at an important time in British history. That's an image of Shakespeare's stage, which was a very fluid space that could very quickly suggest many different locations. The principal ingredient in Shakespeare's theater was his brilliant language, as has been said, and so Shakespeare could represent a very wide range of stories, of genres, and of different kinds of action in his plays. So yeah, one of the reasons I think that Shakespeare has endured for so long was that he left behind such a rich and substantial body of work. He had a long and successful career, wrote something like 38 plays. He worked in a whole range of different genres: comedy, tragedy, history, romance. We talk about Roman plays, problem plays, all these different kinds of things, and that enabled him to examine a wide range of human experience. So almost anything that you encounter in your life, even in a culture 400 years removed from Shakespeare, is something that will find some kind of resonance with something in Shakespeare's plays. He deals with all stages of life, with all different kinds of issues, from politics to love to family, and is able to succeed in all these different areas. And his plays are I think all of them, of a kind of depth and richness that allows us to keep interpreting and reinterpreting them. And I think that's another reason he's survived for centuries, is that his plays don't only have one meaning, right? They're not simply trying to tell a singular message, and subsequent generations, subsequent cultures have been able to find different meanings in the plays and create different meanings through performance. That, Shakespeare's play doesn't exist just on the page. It has to be enacted to kind of realize its full potential, and every performance makes slightly different decisions about how that play is going to create meaning, and each new age can find something new in those plays. This is the title page from the first folio of Shakespeare, his the first collected works, which was produced by his colleagues from the Globe Theatre 7 years after his death. And I don't know if you can read, but it says a catalog of the several comedies, histories, and tragedies contained in this volume, and gives a listing of all the plays that are included there. And it divides them by genre into comedies, histories, and tragedies. And I think, as I said, part of what makes Shakespeare great was that he wrote so many different kinds of plays, and that these genres that he explored led him to certain kinds of questions, certain kinds of situations, certain kinds of characters, and the fact that he worked widely across these genres again gives his work the kind of diversity and interest that it has. Just to quickly go through those, Shakespearean comedy is one of his most popular and performed genres, and again, it's amazing that the plays still continue to work and amuse people after 400 years. What are some things that happen in Shakespearean comedies, or some things we associate with Shakespearean comedy? Okay, love at first sight. Certainly love. Shakespeare's comedies all in some way are romantic comedies. They revolve around love stories, and very often they have multiple storylines of young lovers trying to kind of thwart some sort of opposition by the older generation, right? That's true kind of across a lot of different comedies. Yes? Yes, parents always object. Youth always triumphs over age, more or less always, in Shakespearean comedy. Yes? Yeah, there are a lot of mix-ups, right? There's a lot of confusion, but it sort of gets sorted out in the end, and the plays end with multiple weddings. Other things? Mistaken identity. Yeah, very often one of the things that causes those confusions is that somebody is mistaken for somebody else or is pretending to be somebody else. Disguise is also a common feature. A couple of others? I think that covers a lot of it. Let's see what I put. I don't really remember. Yeah, they're funny. They have a lot of laughs. All Shakespeare's plays have a lot of humor, but comedy in particular, they have a happy ending. Usually it's an ending in marriage. The plays have multiple plot lines going at the same time. There's not just one story. Usually there's a bunch of couples being married at the end. Disguise or mistaken identity or something of that sort happens. Another important thing that's not true of all of Shakespeare's plays, but certainly true of the play that we're going to be talking about, A Midsummer Night's Dream, is that they involve some sort of journey from one kind of world to another. They very often start in a court or a city, where there's some kind of problem, life is hard, there's some kind of irrational law governing people's lives, and the characters, the young characters especially, have to flee. They flee to often what the critic Northrop Frye called a green world, right? Another kind of world where it's out in nature, the kind of laws don't apply, people get involved in sort of confusing situations that turn their lives upside down, and eventually it kind of gets sorted out and the couples go back to the city and a new society kind of forms around the young couples. So I've kind of dwelt on this a lot because we're going to be talking about Midsummer Night's Dream. I'll go through some of the other genres a little more quickly. History, these are plays, and these photos are all from performances at Winedale. The previous one was As You Like It. This is Henry V, and that's the Winedale Theater barn you can see in the background. Yeah, the histories are plays that are based on kind of stories from medieval kingship, from old chronicles. They deal with problems of government and leadership, and they focus on the kind of the role of the king and his responsibilities as well as his human limitations. They also frequently show the whole nation, not just the people at the very top, but people like the characters in the tavern in Henry IV, Part 1. And they can include a lot of comedy and tragedy as well as historical elements. They're plays that are about human characters. They're personal as well as political. Tragedy, we probably know about, right? Ends in death. Invariably, I think, for Shakespeare. It's more in the second half of his career. He started writing comedies and histories, and after about 1600, his work takes a dark turn. It may have been for personal reasons. He lost his young son. It also has to do with the kind of spirit of the age, anxieties around Queen Elizabeth's death and the accession of James I, and generally with, a kind of new Renaissance skepticism undermining some of the kind of certainties of the old medieval worldview. Romance, his last few plays seem to be of a different genre. His company didn't have this title, but they're plays that are kind of mysterious and beautiful and deal with both tragic and comic elements. They're tragicomedies, and they often involve two different generations. Plays like The Winter's Tale, The Tempest, and so forth. So anyway, I love the fact that Shakespeare does have this kind of variety, and it's something that at Winedale we try to use as part of our process, because in the summer the students are performing multiple plays, and I always like to have plays that are from different genres, from different points in Shakespeare's career, where the students get exposed to the whole kind of breadth of his work. And that's going to be true this summer as well. In the 2018 season, we have an early comedy, Love's Labour's Lost, a very funny play. We have Julius Caesar, a tragedy, which is also one of Shakespeare's most political plays, right? It's one of the Roman history plays that deals with a lot of questions about how you should run your society and what do you do if you have somebody who is in charge of your society that you think is not the best person for the job, and what is the responsibility of the citizen in those kind of situations. So a very timely play in that respect. All's Well That Ends Well is a late comedy, but it has some of the kind of qualities of the romance, right? Some of the fairy tale aspects and the sense of a story where the happy ending comes at a price, but it ends with a lot of emphasis on forgiveness and reconciliation. And finally, we're doing as a kind of bonus this summer a play called Arden of Faversham, which is by Shakespeare, we're almost certain, as well as some collaborators. It's a play that's kind of newly become a part of the canon, and it's a fascinating sort of Tudor kind of true crime story about a murder that took place in the village of Faversham. And it's also a very funny play because the murderers are spectacularly inept, and it takes them sort of multiple attempts to successfully carry out this murder that really happened. And earlier this year, my wife Laurel and I visited the village of Faversham and actually were able to go to the house where this crime took place in the 16th century, which is still standing. And all of the kind of locations that are discussed in the accounts of the crime and in this play are still there, so you can kind of work out the way that things must have happened. It's a fascinating play. It's never been done at Winedale, and so I would encourage people to come and check it out. Okay, so I'm going to move on to talking about Winedale itself and a little bit about its history fairly quickly. But who's been to the Winedale Historical Center here? So, okay, about half of you have been out there. It's located on the way to Houston, out 290, about halfway to Houston, near the town of Round Top. And it's part of a wonderful little community that's very invested in the arts. It's close to the Festival Institute, classical music festival that's there in the summer. There's also antique fairs and lots of other things to do in that area. But it is a property that was donated to the university by Miss Ima Hogg in the 1960s, and she paid for the buildings to be renovated and then donated them to the University of Texas. And one of those buildings is the theater barn that you see here, which is where we perform the plays. That's one of the early classes from, I guess that's the early 80s. But yeah, every summer, the founding director, Dr. James Ayers, there he is, started bringing students out to perform Shakespeare in this barn beginning in 1970. And his philosophy was that the best way to learn about Shakespeare is by performing it, and that's something that I certainly agree with and have tried to carry on. In the old days, just to skip back, it really was just a barn. It's kind of a hayloft that we used as the kind of second level. There was a clay floor and so forth. And it's gradually been adapted to be more and more like an Elizabethan playhouse. There's Doc. And there he is again. You can see the clay floor of the stage. That's from the summer that I was a student at Winedale in 1983. That's John Rando, who was the first Hamlet at Winedale, and it gives a sense of the grounds and that kind of beautiful pastoral surroundings that are a part of the student's experience being out there in the summer. Yeah, John now is a very successful theater director, and he's actually won a Tony Award. So it was great to be there. I played Fortinbras in that Hamlet, so I got to close off the play. But John was amazing. That's that class, yeah, in 1983. So you can see me in the back, and if anyone knows Clayton Stromberger, that's Clayton. There's Doc, John Rando, Sherry Gray, Brian Foster is still a close friend of mine. A lot of my closest friends are from that group, and I think that's something special that happens a lot in the Winedale summers. The students go through this fairly intensive experience of working hard for several weeks on multiple Shakespeare plays, and it kind of bonds them closely together. There I am with Clayton, much younger and with darker hair, but yeah. And there I am more recently with my wife Laurel, who has been a huge help to me in directing the program. I came on in 2001 as the director. It was my first year, so this will be my 18th summer directing Shakespeare at Winedale. Doc did it for 30 years and is still involved with the summer camp that we have for young people, for teenagers out there. We do 2 sessions every summer. So I doubt I'll make it to Doc's 30-year record, but anyway. Yeah, so that, as you can see, it's a very beautiful environment. That's a class getting ready to perform Cymbeline. This is one of the daily schedules that we have that gives a sense of kind of what the students do day to day in the summer. I don't know if you can see it, but the first item at 6:30 is morning sports, TBA, depending on field conditions. And then we go on to breakfast and warm-ups and work on the play for the day, and then that evening we perform as much as we've worked on. We also do sewing. The students make their own costumes. text work, and other projects, music, dance, etc., and as well as volleyball, which is always a big part of the summer. Yeah, that gives a sense of kind of how the students work out there and how the summer goes. There are some students working on the stage. It's very hot in the summer, but you know, everybody's in shorts, and that gives a sense of the inside of the barn when the chairs aren't set up. And yeah, it's they're just up there kind of trying to find out what the play means and how best to communicate it to an audience, and that's the kind of main part of the experience. Yeah, as I said, they make their own costumes, and that's from The Merry Wives of Windsor, also a very funny play. And that's a shot, actually. This is a kind of neat thing that we do every summer, is we work outside on the plays. We do what's called a peripatetic run of one of the plays, where the students, instead of being on the barn and having to think about which way to face and what their blocking is or whatever, we just go out all over the property and just do the play in 3 dimensions. And it's always a kind of very exciting way to sort of learn more about the play. And so that's what's happening there. This is Clayton Stromberger doing some work on our outreach program that we do during the year, work with students in Austin schools, introducing young people from 4th, 5th grade onward to Shakespeare through the performance method. And then we always have them come out and perform at Winedale on the day of our spring performance. So April 28th, I think, we'll be performing Midsummer Night's Dream in the evening, but the students will be there earlier in the day doing some of their scene performances. There you see some of the kids performing. And oh, that's our students actually working on the stage at Shakespeare's Globe in London. We've at different times gone to different theaters at the end of the summer to try to learn from performing in Elizabethan-style theaters. So several years ago, a few different times we went to the Globe early in its existence. And that's at the Blackfriars Theater in Stanton, Virginia, which is also a place that we go now every year. And it's a recreation of Shakespeare's indoor playhouse, the Blackfriars Playhouse. And it's a very, very beautiful space, and we are always thrilled to get a chance to perform there. That's at a castle that's out near Winedale, near Belleville, actually, that for some reason someone decided to build out in the middle of the forest. And so we go out there sometimes to work on, especially history plays. It's a really fun setting. Okay, so moving on to A Midsummer Night's Dream, which is the play that we're working on at the moment at Shakespeare at Winedale. It will be performed April 27th and 28th in the evening, and I passed out a few handouts about our schedule. We'll also do a performance on campus on the Tuesday of that week, so April 24th at 7. And if you go to the Shakespeare at Winedale website, you can find out more about our performances. If you just Google Shakespeare at Winedale, you'll find us. So Midsummer Night's Dream is one of Shakespeare's most beloved plays. I think it's one of his most perfect comedies. It has all of the elements that I talked about before in terms of young love, parental opposition, running away to the forest, multiple marriages at the end. It has all of the good stuff that we associate with Shakespearean comedy and all of the humor and so forth. But it also has this added dimension, or a couple of added dimensions. One of dreams, right? The notion of the imagination, the unconscious, those kinds of things that come through in the play. Certainly also magic. There's a supernatural aspect. There are these fairies who mischievously get involved in the fates of the characters, and there's this kind of beautiful evocation of the forest by moonlight and the magical things that dwell there, and the transformative power of the magic of the forest that I think gives a kind of richness to the play even beyond some of Shakespeare's other comedies. And finally, there's an aspect of what we call meta-theatricality about the play, of kind of self-consciousness about its status as a play and how Shakespeare's theater works, right? And that's one of the things that has been really fun. Our class this semester has been studying a lot is this kind of sense of Shakespeare's self-conscious meta-theatricality. There are a group of characters within the play who are performing a play, and they talk a lot about kind of what that entails. And we'll get a little sample of that here in a minute. That's a famous image by William Blake of the fairies dancing. Here's another image from the 19th century showing a sort of darker, kind of stranger vision of the world of the play and the supernatural, and maybe some of the sense of kind of a dreamlike, unconscious power. So yeah, it's a play of multiple storylines, and just to kind of quickly go through them, there's Theseus and Hippolyta, famous classical heroes who are getting married, and their marriage forms kind of the frame of the play. There are four young lovers who are, again, kind of thwarting the older generation and run off to the woods to do so. This is an image from the 1935 film, Warner Brothers film, with Olivia de Havilland as Hermia. The film is a mixed bag, but it's kind of wonderful, and I would certainly recommend it. Then you've got this group of characters called the Rude Mechanicals, these Athenian craftsmen who are performing a play in honor of the Duke's wedding, and they're very funny characters. And then the fairies themselves. This is from a famous production by Peter Brook that used a very kind of different sort of circus metaphor for how the fairies operated. So. And yeah, the thing that I love about the play, especially doing it at Winedale, is that it is about running away to a forest setting to rehearse a play and have these kind of life-changing experiences and get turned upside down and literally make an ass of yourself in the case of one character, and that's all the stuff that happens at Shakespeare at Winedale. So it seems like a great metaphor for the Shakespeare at Winedale experience and vice versa. So we are going to look at just a little bit of the play with two of the students who are in this spring's class and will be performing in just a couple of weeks. This is Finley Scanlon and Patrick Golden, and they play Helena and Demetrius, who are two of the young lovers, and Helena is sort of the odd woman out at the beginning, but over the course of the play becomes the one who is most sought for by the others, by the two men, and then everything gets sorted out in the end, of course. So one of Helena's famous lines, which we'll get to in a minute, "Love looks not with the eyes but with the mind," and that's a thing that the play is really about, is the kind of irrationality of love. So we'll start by hearing a little bit from Helena complaining about her situation in Athens.
How happy some or others some can be. Through Athens I am thought as fair as she. But what of that? Demetrius think not so. He will not know what all but he do know. And as he errs doting on Hermia's eyes, so I, admiring of his qualities. Things base and vile holding no quantity, love can transpose to form and dignity. Love looks not with the mind, but with the eyes. Love looks not with the eyes, but with the mind. Therefore is winged Cupid painted blind, nor hath love's mind of any judgment taste. Wings, and no eyes, figure unheedy haste. Therefore is love said to be a child, because in choice he is so oft beguiled as waggish boys in games themselves forswear. So the boy love is perjured everywhere. I will go tell him of fair Hermia's flight. Then to the wood will he tomorrow night pursue her. For this intelligence, if I have thanks, it is a dear expense. But herein mean I to enrich my pain, to have his sight thither and back again.
All right. So, Helena, thank you. So Helena does go to the forest and leads Demetrius, saying that she knows where Hermia and Lysander have gone, but Demetrius fails to show any interest in her as a consequence. So that's their first entry into the forest is our next scene.
I love thee not, therefore pursue me not. Where is Lysander and fair Hermia? The one I'll slay, the other slayeth me. Thou toldst me they had stolen unto these woods, and here am I, wood within this wood, because I cannot meet my Hermia. Hence, get thee gone, and follow me no more.
You draw me, you hard-hearted adamant, but yet you draw not iron, for my heart is true as steel. Leave you your power to draw, and I shall have no power to follow you.
Do I entice you? Do I speak you fair? But rather, do I not, in plainest truth, tell you I do not, nor I cannot, love you?
And even for that do I love you the more. I am your spaniel, and Demetrius, the more you beat me, I will fawn on you. Use me but as your spaniel, spurn me, strike me, neglect me, lose me, only give me leave, unworthy as I am to follow you. What worser place can I but beg in your love, and yet a place of high respect with me, to be used as you use your dog?
Tempt not too much the hatred of my spirit, for I am sick when I do look on thee.
And I am sick when I look not on you.
You do impeach your modesty too much, to leave the city and commit yourself into the hands of one that loves you not. The trust, the opportunity of night, and the ill counsel of a desert place with the rich worth of your virginity.
Your virtue is my privilege. For that it is not night when I do see your face. Therefore I think I am not in the night, nor doth this wood lack worlds of company. For you, in my respect, are all the world. Then how can it be said I am alone when all the world is here to look on me?
I'll run from thee and hide me in the brakes and leave thee to the mercy of wild beasts.
The wildest hath not such a heart as you. Run when you will, the story shall be changed. Apollo flies and Daphne holds the chase. The dove pursues the griffin. The mild hind makes speed to catch the tiger, bootless speed, when cowardice pursues and valor flies.
I will not stay thy questions. Let me go, or if thou follow me, do not believe, but I shall do thee mischief in these woods.
Aye, in the temple, in the town, in the field, you do me mischief. Fie, Demetrius, your wrongs do set a scandal on my sex. We cannot fight for love, as men may do. We should be wooed, and we're not made to woo. I'll follow thee and make a heaven of hell, to die upon the hand I love so well.
Good. All right. So what happens then is that the fairy Puck puts a spell on Demetrius that will cause him to fall in love with the next being that he sees, and of course he sees Helena, and then her world is reversed, right? Suddenly Demetrius seems to be in love with her. So we'll just look very briefly at that moment. So I guess, Demetrius, if you want to be asleep somewhere, and Helena will wake you up.
Oh, Helen, goddess, nymph, perfect divine, to what my love shall I compare thine eye? Crystal is muddy, oh how ripe and show thy lips, those kissing cherries tempting grow. Oh, that pure congealed white high Taurus snow, fan with the eastern wind, turns to a crow, and thou holdst up thou hand. Oh, let me kiss this princess of pure white, the seal of bliss.
Oh, spite, oh, hell, I see you are all bent to set against me for your merriment. If you were civil and knew courtesy, you would not do me this much injury. If you were men as men you are in show, you would not use a gentle lady so, to vow and swear and superpraise my parts, when I am sure you hate me with your hearts. Can you not hate me as I know you do, but join in souls to mock me too? You both are rivals, and love Hermia, and now both rivals to mock Helena. A trim exploit, a manly enterprise, to conjure tears up in a poor maid's eyes with your derision. None of noble sort would so offend a virgin, or extort a poor soul's patience, all to make you sport.
All right. Good. So then, at the end of the night, there's a lot of confusion, as you can imagine, but at the end of the night, the lovers wake up, and Demetrius is still in love with Helena, Helena is still in love with Demetrius, Hermia and Lysander are in love with each other, so everything turns out to be okay. They are awakened by Theseus and Hippolyta and a royal party that's come to the woods to hunt, and as they wake up, they kind of sort out what their experience must have been. I think maybe it was some kind of dream. So I'll be Theseus for this moment, and you have to imagine that Hermia and Lysander are also here. I pray you all, stand up. I know you two are rival enemies. How comes this gentle concord in the world, that hatred is so far from jealousy, to sleep by hate and fear no enmity?
My lord, fair Helen told me of their stealth, that this is their purpose hither to these woods, and I in fury hither follow them, fair Helena in fancy following me. But, my good lord, I wot not by what power, but by some power it is. My love to Hermia, melted as the snow, seems to me now as the remembrance of an idle god, which in my childhood I did dote upon, and all the faith, the virtue of my heart, the object and the pleasure of mine eye, is only Helena. To her, my lord, was I betrothed ere I saw Hermia, but like a sickness did I loathe this food, but as in health come to my natural taste, and now I do wish it, love for it, long for it, and will forevermore be true to it.
Fair lovers, you are fortunately met. Of this discourse we more will hear anon. Aegeus, I will overbear your will, for in the temple by and by with us these couples shall eternally be knit. And for the morning now is something worn, our purposed hunting shall be set aside. Away with us to Athens, 3 and 3 will hold a feast in great solemnity.
These things seem small and undistinguishable, like far-off mountains turned into clouds.
So methinks, and I have found Demetrius like a jewel, mine own and not mine own.
Are you sure that we are awake? It seems to me that yet we sleep, we dream. Did not you think the Duke was here and bid us follow him?
And Hippolyta, and he hath bid us follow him.
Why then, we are awake. Let's follow him, and by the way, let us recount our dreams.
All right, so you have in miniature there one of the plot lines of Midsummer Night's Dream, and you can see how the dream metaphor applies to the kind of crazy experience of love that these characters undergo. Thanks to Patrick and Finlay for coming out on a Sunday and helping us with that. All right, we have almost come to the end of the play. The main plot lines have all been resolved as morning dawns in the Athenian forest, but there's one more sort of bonus section of the play to come, which is this play performed by the Rude Mechanicals, the story of Pyramus and Thisbe. And this is just a wonderful little extra that Shakespeare gives you in Act 5 of Midsummer Night's Dream. Pyramus and Thisbe is a kind of a Romeo and Juliet type story, so it's appropriate to the situation of the lovers, but it's presented in a very sort of comic and burlesque way. And just to conclude, I'd like to do a little version of the dumb show of Pyramus and Thisbe, which doesn't require knowing any lines or anything like that, but it does require 5 volunteers from the audience who are willing to come up and do a little bit of performance. So the characters are Pyramus, Thisbe, the wall, moonshine, and the lion. So do I have a volunteer who will come up and play Pyramus? All right, yeah, we got a Pyramus. Okay, good, good. So Pyramus is the Romeo of this story. He's in love with Thisbe, but their parents are fighting, and then they have a tragic ending, which we'll get to in a minute. So Thisbe is the beautiful maiden. Do we have a volunteer for Thisbe? Thisbe? All right. All right. Okay, Thisbe, thank you. All right. So, yeah, Thisbe in the play and in Shakespeare's theater is performed actually by a boy, Francis Flute, and there's some humor around that. So Shakespeare is kind of poking fun at some of the conventions of his theater. In this instance, that joke isn't the same. But anyway, so we have the young lovers, Pyramus and Thisbe, who will have to whisper together through a chink in a wall, which is the wall that divides their families. So do we have a volunteer for the wall? Anyone want to play the wall? Again, okay, wall. All right, come on up. So we'll set up this stage picture a little bit. So Pyramus, you're over here. The wall will be in between, and yeah, you have a chink, right, that they will whisper through at a certain point. And then later, also, you guys will have to kill yourselves. So that's the other thing that happens. Moonshine is the next character. One of the really interesting scenes in the play is in Act 3 when the mechanicals are rehearsing, and they're trying to figure out how can we tell this story about these lovers meeting by moonlight, talking through a wall, being attacked by a lion. We can't represent any of those things. And then they kind of work out some solutions of having actors play those roles and having the audience use their imagination and so forth. So it's a way that Shakespeare is kind of meditating on how his own theater works and having a good time sort of making fun of that. So Moonshine, who wants to be Moonshine? All right, from the back. Yeah, all right, I mean, you can be the lion. All right, so yeah, come on up, Moonshine and lion. So Moonshine, you pretty much just have to like hold up a lantern. Actually, yeah, this is a very small lantern, but yeah, you can hold that up, and you're supposed to have a dog and a thorn bush. We don't have to worry about that for now, but those are things associated with the man in the moon, and so the moonshine is kind of representing the man in the moon and the moon. And then the lion, come on up, is the dangerous animal that threatens Thisbe, and Thisbe runs off, and the lion gets blood on Thisbe's mantle, which is left behind. So I don't know if we have anything we could use for the mantle. You just like take your jacket off just for a sec. Is that yeah? When we get to the or if you have something we can use for a mantle. That then so when you flee the scene, the lion will get blood on the mantle. Yeah, we'll get to that in a sec. And then Pyramus thinks Thisbe is dead, kills himself. Thisbe comes back, finds Pyramus's body, and kills herself, and we have the tragic ending of the story. So we're going to do this in the Elizabethan manner with no rehearsal at all. So we're just going to do it. I will recite the prologue that accompanies the dumb show, and you guys just carry out the actions that are described, and I'll go slowly and it'll be fairly evident. So if everybody maybe just kind of steps back a little bit and then kind of step forward as your moment occurs. The other thing that's kind of funny is that Shakespeare, the mechanicals are worried that the lion is going to be too frightening and that people are going to think it's real, and it's going to scare the ladies and so forth. So there's a lot of anxiety about just how powerful theater is. That doesn't come up so much in this part. But okay, so thank you all very much for indulging us with this performance. And I'll put the text up here, and you guys just go as I recite, and we'll see how this goes. All right. Gentles, perchance you wonder at this show, but wonder on till truth make all things plain. This man is Pyramus, if you will know. This beauteous lady Thisbe is, certain. This man with lime and rough cast doth present wall, that vile wall which did these lovers sunder. And through wall's chink, poor souls, they are content to whisper, at the which let no man wonder. This man with lantern dog and bush of thorn, presenteth moonshine. For, if you will know, by moonshine did these lovers think no scorn to meet at Ninus' tomb, there to woo. This grisly beast, that lion hight by name, the trusty Thisbe coming first by night, did scare away, or rather did affright. And as she fled, her mantle she did fall, which lion vile with bloody mouth did stain. Yeah, so lion, you got to stain. Yeah, Thisbe, you flee. Yeah, you're fine. Lion, stain the mantle. Yeah, you got to leave the mantle. Yeah, there we go. Anon comes Pyramus, sweet youth and tall, and finds his trusty Thisbe's mantle slain, whereat, with bloody, blameful blade, he bravely broached his boiling bloody breast. And Thisbe, tarrying in mulberry shade, his dagger drew and died. For all the rest, let lion, moonshine, wall, and lovers twain at large discourse, while here they do remain. All right. So, thank you to our volunteers, and see, you've now performed a bit of Shakespeare in the Elizabethan style with no rehearsal, and you made an entertaining little play of it. Okay, I think we are out of time, but we have time just for a couple of questions. Yeah, okay, so great. Questions? Yes, from the back.
Okay.
In Shakespearean circles, and you're as tighter than I am, Sir Arden of Faversham, is Marlowe given credit? Is Fletcher given credit? And who collaborated with Shakespeare, or who did Shakespeare steal from?
All right. Shakespeare collaborated with a lot of people and stole from a lot of people. That was the way it was in those days. In fact, the first thing we hear about Shakespeare is from someone named Robert Greene, who complains that he's an upstart crow beautified with our feathers, which may be a sort of allegation that Shakespeare has stolen from other writers. But Arden of Faversham, we don't know. It's an anonymous play. Marlowe has been mentioned as a possible author, but I think most people think if the other author is knowable, it might be Kyd, who wrote The Spanish Tragedy and some other things. But we're really not sure. But increasingly, people have come to think Shakespeare wrote the kind of middle section of the play, and that people are doing now computer analysis of the language and finding sort of linguistic signatures for different writers. And people have speculated that Shakespeare was an author or co-author since, I think, the 18th century. But there's been more and more argument in favor of Shakespeare's authorship more recently. And he did collaborate with Fletcher at the end of his career. Fletcher, his last couple of plays are credited to Shakespeare and Fletcher, Henry VIII and The Two Noble Kinsmen. And then Fletcher kind of took over as the house playwright at the King's Men.
Step us back into the politics of the time and give us one thing, one phrase, or one something that Shakespeare said that was referring perhaps to the politics of the time, please.
Yeah, that's a great question. So the politics of the time was changing a lot. And during the first part of Shakespeare's career, you had a relatively stable monarchy under Queen Elizabeth that had lasted for a long time, and then when she dies in 1603, there's a lot of anxiety about what kind of a ruler James of Scotland will be, and the Shakespeare seems to take more of an interest in. He's interested in kind of the politics of medieval kingship in the early part of his career. Later in his career, he also is looking at the psychology of leadership and so forth. A good political line from Shakespeare. It's impossible to pin Shakespeare down in terms of what his politics were, because he was a pretty sensible man and knew that it was dangerous to espouse a lot of ideas about contemporary politics and religion in the theater. Let's see. a great political line that he has in Henry V is when he has King Henry sort of reflecting on the burdens of kingship, and he, like many of Shakespeare's kings do, and he says, he's in disguise, he's talking to some of his men and pretending to be a common soldier, and he says, I think the king is but a man as I am. The violet smells to him as it doth to me. And there's a lot of reflection on the kind of fact that people in power have these extraordinary powers and responsibilities, but at the same time they also have human frailty and fallibility. So, another question.
Yeah, some say,
We're going to use a microphone.
surmise, that rather than collaboration, the way it was done in those days is without taking any ownership. He just handed the scripts over, having been paid little enough, and then whoever had it had their way with it.
Yeah, and
what do you think of that?
Yeah, that seems to have been true, right? That there wasn't yet really the sense of intellectual property of, you know, an author having rights over his work. That was something that was being sort of hashed out at the time. So Ben Jonson, Shakespeare's contemporary, was pretty into being Ben Jonson, the famous author, and he took pains over getting his own work published and so forth. Shakespeare never did, right? And so there are a lot of pirated versions of his plays. He was a sharer in the company, and he seems to have seen his role as primarily, you know, an actor and a writer for that company, and been, you know, concerned with that aspect of it, and not with, you know, publishing, printing, copyright, those kinds of things. But yeah, it's starting to become an issue at the time. But as you say, there was a lot of just pieces of paper being handed around, and people just kind of working with whatever they could get their hands on.
We were talking last night at dinner, believe it or not, about Shakespeare and his characters with mental illness. So many characters are mentally ill, and they all seem to die. Is there any research that shows why Shakespeare had such insight into these mental illnesses? Was he himself depressed or suffering from mental illness?
We don't really know much about Shakespeare as a person. That's one of the things that's really interesting about studying Shakespeare, is that though he was a famous and successful writer, he seems to have made little impression on people as an individual, as opposed to someone like Christopher Marlowe or Ben Jonson. These were the kind of larger-than-life people about whom we know a lot, and they lived kind of colorful lives. Shakespeare seems to have just kind of expressed himself through his work. So the facts we know about his life are limited. There certainly is a lot of exploration of inner anguish and trauma, especially in this kind of tragic period of the early 17th century, that has led people to speculate, oh, Shakespeare, must have gone through some tough times, or, some of his plays have seemed to some people in the past to even show, a kind of, obsession on a particular topic or something. I don't think we know enough to really say, but we can say that he found the range of kind of mental conditions powerful and expressive, often as a kind of metaphor, right? There's often a sort of character who goes through a kind of dark night of the soul and gains some sort of insight, like King Lear, for instance. But there's a lot of madness as a trope is pretty common in Elizabethan tragedy, as it is in the classical tragedies, like the Seneca tragedies that provide the sources. The Elizabethans weren't particularly sensitive about mental illness. They, had places like Bedlam Hospital, where mad folk were considered to be kind of entertainment, and there that is depicted in various Shakespeare plays. But Shakespeare himself seems at least to have had a very kind of sympathetic and sensitive approach, at least some of the time, to the kind of extremes of mental anguish that some of his characters, like Ophelia, Lear, and others, Lady Macbeth, go through. So I think his treatment of mental illness still seems, I think, powerful to us.
With the enduring legacy of Shakespeare's plays and the universal themes it always deals with, is there anyone out there, playwright today in the last 50 years, that we'll be watching 200 years from now?
That's a great question. Obviously, it's very hard to know, what things will remain kind of culturally vital. Maybe because I've just been involved with his work a lot recently, or also because I met him earlier this week, which I'm excited about. Tom Stoppard seems to me, one of our kind of great modern playwrights who has a career, a very long and full career that in that way is kind of comparable to Shakespeare. And he has an interest in heightened language, complicated ideas, and sort of enduring human situations that I think has given his work quite a bit of staying power, since his first play, which is a kind of Shakespearean play, Shakespearean takeoff, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead, which was written over 50 years ago. And I think 50 years from now, people will still be looking at Stoppard's work. But it's very hard to say. Shakespeare, couldn't have predicted that, within 50 years after his death, all the theaters in England would have been closed. And, his theater tradition was completely eradicated throughout the space of the English Civil War and the interregnum. And he only gradually came back to prominence later in the 18th and 19th centuries. So the future of drama is always very hard to predict. But I will guess that 50 years from now we'll still be studying and performing Shakespeare. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Loehlin. Students, thank you for coming out.